Students often ask me, what is marketing and what are the skills a good marketer needs? I always have to tell them that marketing is a relatively new field. It's only been around for about 50 years. And I also tell them that marketing doesn't have a unifying theory. It doesn't have one theory or one discipline that underpins it. We as marketers borrow from many areas. We borrow from psychology. We borrow from economics. We borrow from sociology. And increasingly, we're borrowing from biology by looking at neural functions in reaction to certain advertisements or certain products or services. Other areas that marketers draw upon are political science to some extent, because when you study global marketing or international marketing, you're going to talk about different political environments and legal environments. Another field that I like to draw upon is history. My first degree as an undergrad was in history, and I often use historic examples to talk about how marketing, for instance, emerged at the same time as the Industrial Revolution. During the age of mass production, which came out of the Industrial Revolution, companies had to find ways of selling mass-produced goods. And that's when the marketer came into existence, because the marketer's job was to create demand that could absorb the products that were being mass-produced. So when I teach marketing, I draw upon many, many disciplines. And I have to say that's one of the reasons why marketing is such an enjoyable subject. So marketing is a very broad field. It's very important. I always tell students that the goal of the marketer is to create value. And if a product or service has value, it's going to be competitive in the marketplace. So value is what gives a product or service a competitive advantage. And marketers have to understand what constitutes value. Now, it's very important to note that value can be a very subjective notion. So sometimes if you differentiate a product in a certain way, some people will find value in that product and they'll definitely want to own it. So if you use the right brand or a specific design, that can create demand among certain segments. Now, that point brings me to my next point, which is, what are the skills a good marketer needs? And I'll say that a good marketer needs to be logical. They need to be able to think abstractly and logically. But a good marketer also has to have a subtle mind. You have to be able to discern how small changes or small things can potentially have a big impact. And if you look at the most successful marketers in history, people like Nicholas Hayek of the Swatch Group or Steve Jobs of Apple, these were men who were visionaries because they understood that repositioning a product or changing the design of a product in a specific way would have a big impact, especially in the case of Steve Jobs, because all the market research told him that the iPhone would never be a success. And it turned out to be the most successful product in history, arguably. So a marketer has to have the ability to think logically. They have to understand finance and mathematics. They should also be able to think abstractly. You have to be able to project what your needs will be in terms of financing and in terms of resources. But you also have to put yourself in other people's shoes, and you have to be able to think subtly. I always tell students that the French mathematician Pascal said there were two forms of genius. There was the logical mind and the subtle mind. And I always tell them that for marketing, both are very relevant.